Today I'm going to talk about rocker arm adjustment on the Cadillac 472-500. If you look at the rocker arms, most people call them non-adjustable. They strictly bolt down and there's no adjusting nut, just like on a Chevy, you got no way to change it. Now, it's technically not non-adjustable. The adjustment actually comes in a different pushrod length. If you've got one that's a little off, what you're supposed to do is put in just a little longer pushrod. And that makes up for the distance here so that it doesn't clack on you. The dealership used to have these push rods in a bunch of different lengths. And occasionally in a motor, you'll run across one where they fixed it. So you always got to pay attention. There could be a 5, a 10, or 20, or 40 long push rod. In this motor, to fix the noise, I have 3 30 long push rods and 1 40 long push rod. That got rid of the noise. But if anybody takes it apart down the road, they could get confused. That's why you need to try and keep them in the same spot, because you never know if there's one a little bit longer. Now, I understand the problem with push rods is they're getting expensive. And the other choice you have is on the rocker setup, you can mill down this little bit right here. And that will lower the rocker arm a little bit and put more pressure on the push rod and the lifter. Now, when you're lowering it, you're actually going to lower both sides because you're taking material out here. By doing that, if you were to take 15 thousandths out here and you're lowering it down because you've got a rocker ratio of like 1.7, you're going to actually push this side down like 20, 22 thousandths. It's going to be more than the 15. It's not going to be quite double because of the rocker ratio, but you have the valve here, and as this goes up, the rocker will rock back, which puts more pressure down there. So you can do that, but if you're only a little bit off, 30 thousandths off, you're not taking 30 off of here. You're only taking maybe 15 or 20. So you got to be really careful about what you're doing and how much you take off. Now the question is, why do you have to adjust the rocker arms? Technically, the lifter is supposed to do the work. Now inside the lifter, the push rod pushes down, and the little plunger inside adjusts for how much you need to have. So that's part of the reason it's considered non-adjustable, is the lifter's doing it. But on the camshaft, if it starts to wear, then you could run into a problem where you don't have enough preload or push down on the lifter. Now these technically have about maybe 200 thousandths worth of travel, but most of the time we're only pushing them down like 30 or 40 thousandths. So you can run into some problems. On this motor, because it's old, it's never been rebuilt, the plunger actually was kind of stuck. So they're sitting down here and not wanting to adjust up. So by making the push rod just a smidge longer, I push it down to where it's still got nice travel, and then it can adjust on its own and the noise goes away. Now, part of that is just dirt and crud jamming it up. You could take the lifter apart, but you're doing one at a time, and it's a bunch of little parts, and they're sometimes hard to get apart, and that can take a while. So it kind of depends on the age of the motor. The other thing that comes up, if you're still using stock rocker arms, is camshaft. If you swap in a cam, and it has more lift here, what they do to get more lift at the peak of the lobe is they cut the backside of the cam, because this can't be any bigger than this. And so what they actually do is they cut back here and increase the height, the amount of travel up, which gives you more lift. Now when they do that, the lifter then sits lower down in the bore. And because of that, then the push rod winds up being a little short. So depending on how big of a cam you stuff in it, you may have to deal with the preload on the lifter and see whether or not you've got enough. And that's when a lot of times you go to, I think this is like a 75 long push rod. So this gives me 75 thousandths more push down. Now, if you're rebuilding the whole motor, not just putting a cam in, one of the things is the head and the block get milled a little bit. Now, you take 20 thousandths off the block, you take 15 maybe off the head. That lowers this whole assembly to where the push rod basically winds up a little long. Now, normally the lifter has got enough adjustment that that's not a problem. It just sits a little lower down in the lifter. But sometimes you can run across a lifter where, especially if it's an older lifter and you've done something, where the push up is too long and then it's going to hold the valve open. So in that case, you wind up having to go to a shorter push rod to try and compensate for it. Or you wind up sticking a little shim underneath the pedestal to try and get this to come up. A little 10 thousandths brass shim right underneath just to try and raise this a smidge so that it doesn't bind up and the valve can actually go shut. So that's a quick down and dirty on Cadillac rocker adjustment in a non-adjustable setup. So hope that helps you. Talk to you later. Bye.